welcome back, guys. Today I'm going to give you 3 powerful persuasion tactics which are proven by psychological and behavioral science research. So if you're a small business owner, a salesperson, or a marketer, these tactics will absolutely work for you and improve whatever you're trying to do because they're actually based in science. They have studies backing them. It's not just made up stuff. It's actual real science that works. Let's dive into the first of the 3 tactics. So tactic number 1 is called the door in the face technique. In 1975, Robert Cialdini, who him and his team are actually mentors to me, conducted a very famous study at MIT. And researchers first asked students for a huge commitment. They asked for people to volunteer 2 hours every week for 2 years mentoring juvenile offenders. Almost everyone refused the request because who in their right mind would volunteer 2 hours of their own time a week for 2 years just to do something that you probably don't really care about? Now here's the interesting thing. They immediately followed up with a smaller request after the big request was turned down. And the small request was to spend just one afternoon taking kids to the zoo. So compliance jumped significantly from just 16.7% when asked for the small request on its own in isolation compared to 50% after the big request was presented first. And so this technique was tested actually repeatedly under various different conditions and consistently proved effective each time. And why does it work? Because people have a tendency, they have this social norm where basically we feel like we need to reciprocate to people. But if the ask is too big and we awkwardly say no to the ask, we're much more open to hearing a smaller ask, smaller in comparison to the actual big ask which was asked before. So the small ask came after the big ask and got a higher compliance rate than when the small ask was just on its own. Fascinating, right? And I've seen this in my own business. I used to apply this, and I used to apply it by just having a backup offer. So I used to run a LinkedIn lead generation service, and I would offer training to small businesses, teams of small businesses, and I would pitch basically like a big package, a 25 grand package, which included, multiple online workshops per week over 8 weeks to train their team. And it was like an extensive and intensive program for their team where I'd work with them and work with them each week for multiple hours just to get them trained on LinkedIn lead gen. Now, sometimes business owners just didn't want to do that. So this large ask would be like beyond their budget, which would mean that they'd hesitate. So then I would scale back my offer rather than multiple workshops a week of just 1 hour of training per week for the same 8-week period. And the price would be 6 grand. Usually what would happen is the client would quickly accept this kind of more manageable option. And usually they would say afterwards, thanks so much for working with us on the price. And the beauty of this approach is it creates this basically, well, if you don't want this, do you want this instead? And it gives a backup offer. Now, in my case, it was a genuine offer. I knew that some places just don't want to pay that amount of money, at least not up front. So I'll have a backup option in case they want to pay this. And I didn't actually think about the persuasion element of that at first, that this offer actually sounded much more enticing because the big offer came first. And because they felt like, well, we turned him down on that, we better say yes to him on something else. Please don't be one of these people, by the way, that manipulates people and has this giant offer just so people actually choose the smaller offer. You actually want a genuine big offer as well, like I did, because then that keeps everything nice and ethical. And funnily enough, when you go through with this approach, then actually the company is open to discussing the larger offer further down the line. And whoever you're working with will absolutely appreciate that you're working with them on price there. So tactic number 2, authority bias. Stanley Milgram's iconic 1963 Yale study basically showed what crazy lengths people would go to simply because an authority figure had instructed them to do so. So in the study, participants believed they were administering electric shocks to another person with voltage levels clearly marked with 15 volts, slight shock, all the way up to 450 volts, which is danger, severe shock. Shockingly, no pun intended, 100% of the participants continued all the way up to 250 to 300 volt levels that could potentially be lethal to people. Even more crazy is 65% of people proceeded all the way to the maximum shock level, which is 450 volts. And this is merely because someone in a lab coat was calmly insisting that they continue. There was no other form of persuasion here. They were just saying, please continue. But this crazy study was one of the founding studies on authority. There is others as well, but it shows how humans have this basic tendency to trust and obey perceived experts, even against their own judgment or moral hesitation. If you would have asked any of these participants afterwards, would you go up to 250 to 300 volts of shock in a person, which could potentially kill them? I guarantee you almost everyone, probably apart from the psychopaths, would say, I would absolutely not do that. Yet 100% of people did. And 65% of people actually went all the way to the end of the experiment, by which point, the person around the corner who's getting these shocks, they're not really getting shocks, is probably, burnt looking like a marshmallow, right? Now, using authority bias is a double-edged sword. I frequently use it when I am offering behavioral science techniques and strategies to different organizations, whether they're trying to convert more or whether they want to look at strategy. So during my presentation, I will clearly show my authority. I'll show my expertise. I will say how much experience I have. I'll say, I've been in marketing for over a decade. I've learned from the world's renowned persuasion experts. I might even name drop. I might even say I've trained with Ogilvy. I might even say, hey, I'm part of a mastermind with Robert Cialdini and his team, who are like the godfathers basically in influence. Now, when highlighting financial results or successes, this is where I think people have a tendency to go wrong, and it's where I have went wrong before. I've actually tested this. So it's crucial to give your credentials to an audience who are accepting of that. If I say to you, I have generated over 100 million with various different persuasion techniques in various different organizations, which I believe to be true, but that number appears to be excessive to maybe a person who hasn't started out a business, or perhaps a person who's earlier on in the business, they might then not trust you, even though that's true, right? So now I have a tendency to just package it up as, I've generated millions and millions in revenue for various different organizations, because then it's more convincing to the audience, and you can kind of generalize it a little bit more. And the reason I say that is I think some people try and lean in so much to authority, it actually comes off ironically as unbelievable, and you lower your status and your authority and your perceived expertise by saying something like that. So here's how you can leverage authority for your business. So you always lead with your pitch of credentials or potential clients that you've worked with as well. You can use signals, badges, etc. You can explain the results that you've had in organizations. You can explain how long you have worked in a business. You have to be aware that fakers tend to do these as well. So I think one of the hardest things for people to actually fake is deep expertise on a particular subject. Imagine sitting Andrew Huberman down. Everyone's seen Andrew Huberman, right? And imagine a person trying to copy Andrew Huberman and copy the depth of knowledge on his 2-hour long podcast about OCD or about anxiety or something like that. It's going to be very hard for that person to talk in nuanced ways about various different studies. And so likewise, I like to try and prove my authority by also having this depth of knowledge and speaking about a study and speaking about things you should be aware of, right? Because it's very hard to copy that. I didn't just read that in a book. It's likely I've inferred that from results I've got at an organization, or through my own experience or through my own deep research as well. It's hard to do that. Another good example of a person who is very good at putting their authority out there, I don't know if you guys have seen him, his name's Derek from More Plates, More Dates, and he talks about different types of performance enhancing use with athletes and things like this. And he talks about it at such a deep level that you can tell he's an expert. He's not reading off a script or anything that's made by AI or anything like this. He's just reading, he's just working from his notes and his mind, which shows this degree of authority. Humans, remember, are very, very, very good at picking up on people who are trying to deceive them, because it's evolutionary wired in us. So you must try and work out what real authority you have in the space. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Tactic number 3, using the word because. If you give any reason, you can watch compliance climb. Ellen Langer's 1978 Harvard study showed how powerful it is to give a reason when you ask someone for something. So in her experiment, people were more likely to let someone cut in line at a photocopier if they gave a reason. When a person said, "Can I cut in because I'm in a rush?" 94% of people actually said yes and just let the person cut in line. Even when the reason made no sense, it still saw a compliance rate climb. So when people just said, "Can I cut in front because I have photocopies to make?" 93% still agreed. But without any reason at all, when people were just like, "Can I cut in line?" only 60% agreed. So that's a big difference. That's 30% difference. Now imagine applying that 30% difference to one of your marketing campaigns, or even when you go for an ask from a customer when you're trying to sell something. And I actually ran this in my own business and saw a result. I ran a test for webinar signups, and this was years ago now, but one version simply said, "Reserve your seat now." And the other version, the one that I'm actually testing with the persuasion in it, added a single reason. And the single reason was, "Reserve your seat now because we cap attendance at 100 to protect Q&A time." So it was a real reason. And the second version got a 28% more clicks, just giving people a reason. Even one that they already likely know makes the request feel valid and more urgent as well. And people have a tendency to be like, "Nah, that's a good reason. I'm probably going to take action on this." So here's how you can use it in your own marketing. Always add "because," follow with a reason. I would follow with a real reason in your call to action. It doesn't have to be like a made up one. I would actually follow with a real reason, because you've got the time and you probably have got a real reason. Keep it short and simple. One clear sentence is better than a long explanation, as always in behavioral science, and make sure the reason speaks to something that your audience cares about, right? Say it's like saving their time, or getting exclusive access, or staying secure. Even a basic reason will work well if you can't think of anything that's too complicated. Okay, so we covered a lot of information in this video. It's very dense. I want you to let me know if you like this type of dense video where I kind of just go through things which are high level persuasion tactics. We covered start off with a big ask first and then scale back. We covered showing real, genuine expertise, not fake expertise, by the way. And always give a reason when you're marketing or when you're trying to sell to someone, or even in like negotiations and things like this. If you give a reason, people believe it more. I will try my best to come out with another video. It takes me quite a while to prepare these videos to get it right and to make sure everything's the best it can be for you guys, basically. But I'll try and do another one of these next week if you enjoyed it. But let me know though. Thank you. Take care.